Okay, so as we said, my name is Kristen Ma, and we're going to be talking about natural Ayurvedic solutions for damaged skin. And just to give you an overview, if you don't know about Ayurveda, it is a holistic modality that is originally from East India, and it's a little bit similar to Chinese medicine, but different. I think they share a lot of philosophy and concepts, but you're going to learn a lot about that today. And we're really going to be talking about beauty from the inside out, as well as what we can tell from our skin, from our damage, about what's happening inside. So it's really going to be about that relationship. But before I begin, I always like to say that I like to keep the talks as interactive as possible. So if you have questions, just raise your hand and ask, because sometimes I think that Ayurveda can be a little bit again, conceptual and sometimes a bit abstract. So if there's anything that is unclear, I think more than one person will probably have the same question, as well as I do tend to get really vata when I'm up here, and I can speak really quickly. So, before I begin, I like to introduce myself formally though, just so you understand what perspective that I'll be speaking to you from. So first and foremost, I am a certified esthetician, and I've been in the beauty industry for over 10 years now. But I think what makes my practice and my business unique is that I look at beauty from an Ayurvedic perspective. So I started aesthetics just thinking, I want to do chemical-free skincare, make sure that people aren't being irritated and clogged, but I really found that through my practice and treating acne and treating like rosacea and other inflammatory skin ailments, that we needed to look deeper. So I became an Ayurvedic practitioner, and it made my recommendations and my prescriptions much more effective, but I also think much more meaningful, because for me, now the pursuit of beauty is a pursuit of health. And so it goes beyond vanity and peddling lotions and potions, but also trying to examine oneself and trying to improve oneself and attain wellness. So as I mentioned briefly, I'm also co-owner of Pure and Simple. I run that with my mother, who was one of the people handing out oils, and that's why I was like, get out of here. She's like talking to me. But you work with your mom, so you have a different kind of casual relationship. But we do all natural skincare and Ayurvedic care as well. And we have 4 spas in Toronto, as well as our own line of skincare and a sister brand called Holistic Vanity that I'll be talking to you about today. I'm also the author of Beauty Pure and Simple, like already mentioned, which really moves forward with the idea of education that's important to us at Pure and Simple. And that's why I love doing these kinds of talks. It's just to educate people, again, beyond what we're doing topically and recommendations for your skincare regime, and educating them on a deeper level. But lastly, I always like to mention that I coined it a damaged skin diva, because I can be really into my skin. I had acne for about 10 years, which left my skin quite damaged. I had scarring from it, and I also did a lot of my own scarring because I was afraid of using sunscreen. I thought it would make me break out, and so that also gave me some sun damage. So I'm very aware of damage, and I also am very aware about the emotional impact that not looking how you want to look impacts you. But I think, in my pursuit of clear skin and also the damage care after that, it's really been clear to me that it has to come from the inside out, and that's also been the most effective way to treat skin too. So what I want to emphasize in this talk is that our skin tells a story, and more specifically for today, the damage on our skin tells a story. First and foremost, it tells us a little bit about our skin type. And I'm not talking about dry skin, oily skin combo, which, you go to any counter at a traditional cosmetic retailer, they'll be like dry, oily, whatever. Honestly, I really don't even care about that. What's important to me is what your dosha skin type is. So the kind of skin you have based on your dosha, your energetic composition, will dictate how your skin is damaged. Are you more prone to inflammation? Are you going to be prone to deep scars, like ice pick scars? Are you prone to fine lines? Like, how is that inflammation manifest? And that's going to be based on your dosha skin type. We're going to go through that pretty in-depth in a minute, but I think that's, that connection is really important. The second thing it tells us, our damage tells us, is what's happening internally. Since damage on the outside of our skin often indicates damage internally as well. Again, if you have a lot of inflammation internally, this will express itself externally through broken capillaries and other inflammatory issues. Dehydration too. If your skin is really dehydrated and that's causing other kinds of damage like fine lines and texture, that could be indicative of what's happening internally if you're dehydrated internally. And also it tells you what we've been through. So I was saying I had acne for a long time. I have scars from that, and in some ways I laugh about it. It's like war wounds from my acne days, but it's also a good thing sometimes. I have scars from doing aesthetics, and I have scars, burning yourself and learning and whatnot. So it tells you what you've been through, and it's just kind of indicative of how you've lived your life. So damage occurs as we live our lives, and I don't think we should see it always as a bad thing. And lastly, it does say what we've neglected. Because when I had acne, I did neglect looking long term. I was like, get this acne off my face, burn it off, pick it off. I really couldn't care less. Just get it off my skin. But I wasn't thinking about the aftermath. So sometimes it talks about what we've neglected physically, on the top of the surface of our skin, but also what we've neglected maybe internally or emotionally, because I have a lot of clients who have broken capillaries from inflammation, but maybe, sometimes I find maybe they've neglected, being more relaxed or different aspects of their lives and been really stressed out and sort of haven't been giving themselves that space to really attain wellness and then therefore beautiful skin. And this is also expressed from the way our skin is made up from a physiological point of view. So I like to do have at least one slide where I talk about the makeup of the skin and show you a cross section of the skin. Because as you can see, what we see on our skin is the epidermis, which is that top layer, that's fleshy tone, skin tone, and that's what we see where we see our scarring, our pigmentation, our broken capillaries. But what is actually happening is those skin cells are actually being fed or produced by lower skin layers. So the dermis layer, which is the layer right underneath, is where our skin cells are manufactured, and also where skin pigment is transferred into the epidermis. And then underneath that is the subcutaneous fatty tissue, which is the yellow layer, and that gives our skin cushioning. So if that becomes depleted, that also makes our skin look less plump, less youthful and less moist. So everything that's happening underneath in those deeper layers are expressed on that top layer. So what am I talking about being expressed on the top layer? What is damaged skin? So damaged skin can be characterized as skin aging. I was saying before that it can just be, an indication of how we've moved through our lives. And I use the words aging and anti-aging and premature aging because it's kind of the norm in the cosmetic industry. But what I'm really talking about is damage, because I don't think that we need to be afraid of aging per se, or how many years we're going to be on this planet. It's really about mitigating damage, because I don't think that we want to have a negative connotation to aging. But damage can also be seen as inflammation. So through redness and broken capillaries, that's a form of damage on your skin. But inflammation is also the precursor to a lot of other damage, so it's very important. It can lead to pigmentation. So pigmentation in the form of sunspots, scarring, like I said, any skin marking is usually a product of inflammation. And I do like to mention sun damage specifically, because sun damage is a great example of how the external environment assaults one's skin, and then it results in damage. But how sun damage is expressed is different in different skin types. So some people, it's just burning and they'll get lots of inflammation. Some people, it's through sunspots. And there's this relationship between what we experience from the environment as well as what we have been given genetically that cause our expression of damage. And this relationship really brings me to the slide about Ayurveda. So Ayurveda, again, as for those of you who don't know, is an Eastern science of healing. And it's really an embodiment of mind, body, spirit balance. And those of you who practice yoga will understand it from a yogic perspective. Those of you who understand TCM will see, again, kind of the similarities between Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, but it's really about achieving balance of the energies within our bodies. And there's two main principles in Ayurveda that I want to highlight today. First and foremost, that we are all unique beings. We all have our own unique constitution. And second of all, that we are affected by our environment. That we have a relationship with our surroundings. And that includes things as direct as the weather, the climate, if it's hot, if it's dry, etc. But also with what we eat. So, we take external things and it's processed through our bodies, and that also affects us and our dosha composition. As well as those who surround us. Like if you surround yourself with certain types of people, how does that affect your emotional being too? So it's really about your body's response to its environment and then your body's composition that dictates balance or imbalance. And what I mean by composition, and this is where it gets a little bit abstract, is your dosha. So in Ayurveda, your constitution is characterized by your dosha, and that's made up of 3 doshas. Again, makes it complicated. I wish they had 2 different words for it. But there's 3 doshas, which are basically energetic. They're different energies within our body. There's Vata, which is characterized by air, Pitta, which is characterized by fire, and Kapha, which is characterized by earth and water. So what makes us unique is the ratios of the different doshas in our bodies. And to give an example that I use all the time is to picture yourself as a cup of water. And you have, let's say, 30% Pitta dosha, you've got like 50% Vata dosha, and you've got another 20% of Vata dosha. And that's what you were given when at birth, and that's your sort of like your Ayurvedic genetic constitution. But you do all these aggravating things. So let's say you're living in a Pitta environment and you're eating lots of hot, spicy Pitta foods, again, like fire, and you're really stressed out, and maybe you acquire more Pitta dosha. And we pour some more Pitta liquid into that cup. And all of a sudden, if you don't sort of look at yourself and balance and listen to your body, that starts to overflow. And that fire dosha spills into your tissues and is expressed as, like I said, heat or inflammation, rashing, allergies, etc. So that's, in essence, the concept of balance and imbalance according to Ayurveda. But I think you're going to get a better idea of what I mean when I go through each dosha specifically. And then you'll also be able to identify yourselves within these doshas too. So we all have all 3 doshas, but we usually have a predominance. So the Vata dosha is characterized by air. And I think that Ayurveda has a really beautiful, kind of a poeticness to it because it's so simple and so complex at the same time. So all the characteristics, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, you can kind of attribute to air. So like air, Vata is, it's dry, it's light, it's changing, it's intangible, and you can't hug air, you can't feel air. It's something that, again, is very intangible. And often Vata is described, or people who are high Vata are described, as more spirit than matter. So they tend to be thinner, more like a slender body frame, because they don't have as much tissue, they don't have as much density, because they're more, like I said, spirit than matter. They tend to have dryness and roughness, and that's not just from the skin, but also dry hair, dry nails, and brittleness. So because of that air element, dryness. And then their skin tends to be quite delicate and have fine pores. And Vata, like air, governs movement and change within the body. So I find that the Vata characteristics tend to be people who are have high movement, so they have a lot of movement in their minds. They can, be very forward-thinking and very abstract and conceptual, because again, that intangible essence to them, and maybe lacking grounding, but be very creative and love new ideas and progressive ideas, but can also be a little bit scattered. So that's the essence of Vata from a mental and emotional plane. And that can manifest, if you have too much Vata, as irregularity. And irregularity in your thought processes, attention deficit, or it can be irregularity in your menstruation, or irregularity in your digestion. But when you acquire too much Vata, so often that creates, again, poor digestion and creates gas and bloating, which is air in the GI tract. And Vata also, again, because of its intangibility and like it's not being a material, sort of solid energy to it, also governs depletion. So if you're too high in Vata, you can lose weight, so maybe you lose your hair gets drier or brittle, again, your skin thins out. Osteoporosis is a good example of high Vata. It's like there's like air or space in the bones that is acquired. And this is translated into the skin. So signs of aging like wrinkling and fine lines, dehydration and thinness, loss of elasticity. So premature aging is something that people with high Vata dosha needs to think about. The Pitta dosha is the fire dosha, and so fire, again, when you think about heat, sharpness, lightness, and that's translated into inflammation. So the Pitta frame is usually a medium-sized frame, tends to be athletic, and there's a lot of inflammation. Again, heat and inflammation are really the characteristics of Pitta dosha, and Pitta governs the blood system, hormonal system, all metabolism and digestion. Because like fire, Pitta converts, so it is responsible for all assimilation and transportation within the body. So a good example is like saying that fire cooks food, for instance. So it's converting it from one state to another. Or like I like to think about like grade 12 chemistry, where you have like your equation, you have a little arrow and it says like fire or heat as a catalyst. So then it's converting one thing to another state. So again, Pitta more literally governs digestion, because we also have digestive fire, which processes foods and converts it into energy, etc. But when you have really high Pitta, this can create hyperacidity and sensitivity because of the inflammation. So sensitivity on the surface of your skin to different ingredients and skincare, but also different food intolerances and sensitivities, which seasonal allergies, etc. And when Pitta becomes more chronic, it can manifest as rosacea and inflammatory acne. And because of that transformation aspect, it also leads to freckling, moles, and pigmentation, because it's about the conversion of melanin, of color, into the skin. And Pitta also does sunburn the most easily. So damage from a Pitta perspective, or the people with high Pitta is going to all come rooted from inflammation. And then we have the Kapha dosha, which is characterized by earth and water. And this is very different than the Vata dosha, because earth and water are full of substance. They're very solid. The qualities of earth and water is moisture, coolness, and like I said, stableness. So those with high Kapha dosha tend to be more voluptuous, have a lot of tissue, again, are very solid people who have a lot of moisture and oiliness and abundance in their composition. So their skin tends to be thicker and oily with large pores, and because of the nature of being solid and more grounded, that this energy tends to be more slow moving. So they have great retention of memory, etc., but a lack of movement. So they love the Kapha sort of mentality tends to love routine and also be a little bit resistant to change. But this isn't to say that one dosha is better than the other, because without Kapha, which is like stableness, you cannot achieve like peace and attain nirvana. So you need to be in balance with your doshas as well. And Kapha does govern all accumulation and congestion. So if you have an over accumulation of Kapha, you might get lymphatic congestion and like swelling. You might get mucus congestion or congested pores. And this also translates into stagnation, because sometimes you don't have good blood flow going through your skin, so that you can create dullness or pastiness. And like a whiteness, but it doesn't mean your skin needs to be white. It just means, like, again, like a pastiness. I'm going to take 1 second just to get a sip of water. 1 second. So it's kind of good that I took a sip while you're looking at the space map, because while we talked about how your skin and damage looks according to your dosha, it's also important to look at where your damage takes place. So I could do a whole speech just about face mapping, but what you'll see is that the Vata dosha governs the forehead, where it's thin and not fatty and drier usually. The Pitta dosha governs the middle of the face, where most people experience broken capillaries. That's where rosacea usually starts. And then the Kapha dosha is the lower jawline area. So where damage takes place also can tell you a lot about what's happening through doshas and the specific organs that correspond. So, you know, if you're dehydrated in the large intestine area, perhaps you're constipated causing dehydration. And it goes forth, as you can see, heart with pitta, blood system, and perhaps, you know, your heart is being stressed for many reasons, so you get broken capillaries in the nose area. So how do we solve damaged skin, or how do we support our skin to heal our damage on our own? Well, it can't just come from creams and topicals. It has to come from the inside out. So I'm going to talk about this from an Ayurvedic perspective through skincare, diet, and supplementation. Okay, so I want to start with inflammation, because I was saying that inflammation is often the precursor to other damage. And inflammation is really a response to stress. It can be stress on your skin because you're putting something that you're allergic to or you're getting irritated by, and so you become inflamed. You begin stress on your body, like maybe you're eating things you have food intolerances to, and so your digestion is working extra hard and this causes inflammation. Or it could be stress in the mind. Again, like you even know that when people are stressed out or angry, and that's a form of stress, they can become red immediately. That response is apparent in that example immediately. So this translates into, yes, broken capillaries, but also other damage, because inflammation creates free radicals, and free radicals scavenges our skin tissues and creates oxidative stress, and therefore damage our skin cells on a deeper level. But other things also aggravate inflammation. So dehydration is a huge one. Your skin is dehydrated, you're going to be much more susceptible to inflammation. Water cools fire, as well as water increases your skin's immunity. If your skin cells are dehydrated, they'll be almost like deflated, and there will be tiny like cracks formed in the surface of your skin. If your skin's nice and moist, you know, you'll have that barrier function where your skin cells are plump and taut. Heat is going to aggravate inflammation, and so you can even tell, like when you're in a hot environment, you'll go red, or if you're like working out really hard and you're getting really hot, you'll also go red. And then allergies and food intolerances. As I was saying, anything that stresses your body out will cause inflammation. And again, high pitta will be translated into rosacea, into acne and eczema, which leave their own traces of damage. So what are we going to do? Well, topically, I have my aesthetic hat on, we need to use skincare that is cooling and anti-inflammatory. So, and when I talk about skincare in general, my perspective is always to be using natural ingredients, because they permeate into the skin properly, as well as I don't like putting things on my skin that are going to absorb into my bloodstream, and I would never recommend that to others. So we should be looking for natural ingredients that are great anti-inflammatories. Like, for instance, chamomile water is great. Turmeric is great. Aloe vera is a great cooling, full of water ingredient. Rose water. And so we use this in our rosacea care line and also our holistic vanity damage care line that we're launching at the Full Life trade show. One of the cleansers is actually we do not use water, instead we're using rose water as a base. So you need everything to be cooling and anti-inflammatory, but also hydrating, because I was talking about, you know, the immunity of your skin with water content. So we want to make sure that we're boosting hydration and your skin is containing water. One of my favorite ingredients for this is hyaluronic acid. So hyaluronic acid you can probably find in quite a few products, and we have a hyaluronic acid lotion, and hyaluronic acid is great because it can retain up to 1,000 times its own weight in water. So it's very hydrating, which is great for damage and fine lines, etc., but it's also great for inflammation. And then protection. So obviously we want to be using like great SPF, but also moisture will give your skin protection. So I was mentioning hydration, but also you might want to use an actual oil barrier. So for inflammation, my favorite oil is organic coconut oil because it's one of the best anti-inflammatory oils. And it also has an antibacterial. So if those of you who are looking to treat acne scars, it's good for people who actually have acne because of that antibacterial as well as the moisture. So you're not using alcohol or things like that that disinfect but also clean the skin. And then diet and digestion. So first and foremost, I think you have a lot of inflammation, you need to be looking at food sensitivity. So whether you get it through the tolerance test or do like a food diary and just track like what kind of like makes you feel in what way, like what's making you feel good or like what's making you feel ill. That's really, identifying your food intolerances are really important. But from an Ayurvedic perspective, there is a Pitta calming diet. And the important thing is that you eliminate heat from your diet. So really spicy spices, like hot spicy, like cayenne pepper, like really hot chili peppers, you have to stay away from. Some people actually like get hot and like sweat when they eat too much like super spicy food. So if you have high Pitta, high inflammation, you need to mitigate that. You also need to be eating hydrating foods, and that's not just fruits and veggies, which are obviously important, and water intake, but also avoiding foods that are overcooked, like deep fried foods, barbecued foods, because the moisture has been cooked out of the food. So it's, you need things that are going to also be easy to digest. So when the food is too dry, it's harder to digest. And then you want to eat things that are like sweet and bland. So when I say sweet, I don't mean like Krispy Kreme donuts, which we all wish that was what I mean. But I mean bland. So when you eat spicy food, you usually have like some rice or like bread with it because it mitigates the spice. So those kinds of foods that are bland will actually mitigate heat. And then supplementation. So you want to be taking things that are going to be anti-inflammatory as well. So I love turmeric. I actually used to take high amounts of turmeric capsules because it's a great anti-inflammatory. Neem is another Ayurvedic herb that's used for skin inflammation, and it's also very good for acne. But obviously you have to do an in-depth analysis to see what you're wanting to treat because neem has that antibacterial. You may or may not need that. But then there's other things that you can take that are just found in your own kitchen, like mint is a great cooling herb, chamomile is a great cooling herb. And then, like I said, inflammation leads to pigmentation. It's an expression of inflammation and chronic inflammation. So pigmentation is any darkened lesion, spot, skin mark, scar. You get a wound and you get brown spot, that is pigmentation. Or sometimes people just have uneven skin tone or like parts of their face are darker or lighter than other parts, and that's hyperpigmentation. And that's an expression, again, of inflammation and redness. It's actually just the browning that happens from too much heat. And then our pigmentation production process becomes dysfunctional. And this can also, when I talk about inflammation, can also come from our hormones too. So I've seen pigmentation that comes from hormonal imbalance, but a good example that you may be aware of is pregnancy mask. So some pregnant women, when their hormones become imbalanced, or change rather, they get pigmentation. So it's an expression of Pitta, because again, as I said in our Pitta slide, that Pitta governs hormones. So again, what are we going to do about that? So again, we need to make sure that our skincare is hydrating and cooling, but we also want to exfoliate. So exfoliation is good for a couple reasons. First and foremost, you can actually fade a little bit of your pigmentation through some topical exfoliation. It only gets you so far, but also because you want to clear away dead skin cells so that you can absorb moisture better. Then hydration is also really important, and I found actually that sometimes even doing a simple facial and really boosting someone's hydration actually fades their pigmentation a bit, or it's not a dramatic thing, but you can see it. And so if your skin is chronically dehydrated and then you start hydrating it, it actually it diminishes your pigmented spots. And then you want to use melanin calming ingredients. And I am not an advocate of like bleaches and like harsh peels because again, those create more inflammation. So I look to natural ingredients. So in our, thank you, in our hyaluronic brightening lotion, we put some sea oak, some bearberry, and some Norwegian kelp. And those are natural ingredients known to regulate melanin production. And then we want to use antioxidants. So I was talking about the oxidative stress that free radicals put on our skin cells, and so antioxidants are really important. And you know, you can see that there are a lot of ingredients like green tea and different berry extracts that are great because they have lots of wonderful antioxidants, but also some really wonderful oils, natural oils that are really easy to get, have great antioxidants. Like rosehip oil is loaded with vitamin C, which is a great antioxidant. Sea buckthorn berry oil, sea buckthorn seed and berry oil also have great amounts of vitamin C, which is an antioxidant. And I've seen a reduction in pigmentation from clients of mine who have used these oils long term. And then again, SPF and moisture is important for protection. And when I talk about SPF, I don't mean a chemical SPF, I am talking about a mineral SPF, just to clarify. And then the dietary component, again, we need a Pitta calming diet. And if you actually, you know, mitigate inflammation internally and purge Pitta from your body, I have also seen people's pigmentation lessen. And through supplementation, these anti-inflammatories, but also antioxidants are great. So, you know, I mentioned vitamin C, but you can find vitamin C in some Ayurvedic supplements such as amlaki. Amlaki is a great antioxidant, it has a lot of vitamin C, and it's also good for gentle elimination. So, you know, congestion in the bowel. And then lastly, I want to talk about premature aging. So most likely this happens with those of us who have high Vata dosha because we have thinner skin and we have a more delicate constitution. And we're more susceptible to environmental stress. So you're assaulted by the elements, whether it's like wind or sun or fluctuating temperatures, and that depletes the Vata dosha. But it also happens from Vata emotions. So, you know, stress is very hard on the adrenal and kidneys and dehydrates your body and dehydrates your skin. And then, again, your skin defenses are down, as well as you're more Vata and your skin thins out and gives way to fine lines and wrinkles. Insomnia is also a product of high Vata. So then when we don't have enough sleep, our scales can't regenerate and our bodies can't sort of function properly. Sleep is really important, and I think it's something that a lot of people overlook when they're thinking about skin and beauty care. And then poor diet. So anything, if you're eating in a way that's constipating and drying, like Vatas need to stay away from foods that are too drying and congesting. Constipation will actually lead to more dehydration and also some inflammation, as well as if you're not nourishing your body with, like I said, great fruits and veggies, but also with enough fat content in your body, in your diet. And then lacking skincare. So sometimes I find that there are people who actually aren't using moisturizer, and for certain doshas like Kapha skin types, it's not as bad. But for a Vata skin type that is thin, it needs that actual physical protection. Now, Kaphas actually age very well because their skin, like by nature, is thicker, more oily, and more robust. The constitution in general is more robust. But what Kapha dosha does experience is a lack of circulation. So sometimes this creates dullness and an appearance of like aging because of that youthful glow being absent, as well as texture. So the Kapha dosha tends to have a lot of like deeper scars and texture as it gets damaged. So what do we do? Well, obviously, again, I'm a huge advocate of hydration, boosting water content, and that's very different than oil content. When I say boosting hydration, I'm talking about water, not oil. But also exfoliation, and you can go deeper with Kapha skin types than Vata skin types, obviously, because of that thickness, but it's important for stimulation. So these two doshas need stimulation. Like Pitta dosha cannot take too much heat. These two doshas actually need warming. So serums, oils, etc. that are warming are really important, as well as a warming diet. So you need, if you have high Vata, high Kapha, you need to be eating foods that are probably cooked. So the raw food diet is usually better for Pitta types, as well as those of us in the Pitta, who live in Pitta environments. So like summertime is better than, again, like the Kapha and Vata times, which are cooler times of the year. Because these digestive systems tend to be a little bit less strong. And like warming spices are really great for these doshas too. So ginger, you know, black pepper, and sometimes like if you go to an Indian restaurant, they'll give you some papadam, and it's supposed to be slightly spicy to rev up that digestive fire. And then in the Vata diet, Vatas need to get a good amount of fat. So we can't be afraid of fat because we need good fatty acids. And this will also, you know, you take them internally and it translates into more moist, more robust skin. And from supplementation standpoint, I like to recommend rasayanas. So Ayurveda has a collection of rejuvenating herbs and foods and practices called the rasayanas, and the herbs are, for example, like ashwagandha, shatavari, guduchi. They're actually all antioxidants, but they also promote tissue regeneration. So they're very important, and often they're used like after surgery or after detoxification, anytime that things have been removed from the body because you need to replenish. And you need to take things that are also going to be circulation increasing. So like, again, I mentioned ginger, but also ginseng is great, and vitamin B complex is also good. Which is interesting because sometimes people with very high Pitta actually get nausea from taking B vitamins, and nausea is a Pitta response. And taking oils. So, you know, I was talking about putting oil on the surface of your skin and also incorporating them into your diet, but sometimes you need a little bit extra, and you want to take, like, say, flaxseed oil capsules, just fish oil capsules, just, you know, something that really like beefs up that oil content in your diet and what you're taking internally. So, as you can see, when you're treating damaged skin, it's not just about what you're putting on top, but also how you're treating your body. And I think it's important that we recognize the relationship not only of like beauty from the inside out, but what can I see on the surface of my skin from looking at these like quote unquote like things you don't want on your skin. They tell a story, so it's not, again, just about looking short term and not wanting like breakouts and wrinkles, but also like how can I treat myself better through that journey. So I want to open up now the floor to anyone who has any questions, because I actually find that this is sometimes the most interesting part of the talk. Does anyone have any questions? Yes? What do I think of olive oil? Olive oil is actually tridoshic. You can use it for all 3 doshas. It's a medium weight, so most skin types can use olive oil. We use quite a bit of olive oil in appearance products for that reason. So, thumbs up. Well, I mean, obviously, like, you want to rotate your oils as well, but I do like olive oil. Yes. Yes, so in the samples, I think you have an argan oil, organic argan oil, and you have an organic sea buckthorn berry oil. And sea buckthorn berry, I mentioned before, is great because it has a lot of antioxidants, it's high in vitamin C, it's really good for skin marks, it's great for pigmentation, and it's really good for inflammation. So they actually use it, one of my estheticians told me this actually, she was like, in Russia, we use it for burns because it's great for regenerating tissue and it's great for preventing scarring. So that's one, and the argan oil is second oil, which is a great oil, and it's actually very similar in texture and quality to olive oil. Anyone else? Yes?
Any thoughts on shea butter as it relates to as an anti-aging moisturizer?
Shea butter?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love shea butter. It's rich. So it depends on the dosha too. Like if you have a lot of inflammation, if you have a lot of inflammation in your skin right now, like if you're having a reaction, sometimes you can't use it at that time because fat increases heat, which is why vatas really benefit from like high fatty oils because it actually increases circulation. So sometimes shea butter can be a bit much, like if you're having a reaction, but other than that, it's a great natural emulsifier. Like it's one of those ingredients that often have to be used in natural creams because they marry oil and water. And I am a big fan of shea butter as well. Yes?
Can you elaborate on SPF? You mentioned mineral
Yes. Again, sometimes I could do like talks on these little like things I like have tidbits of, but SPF, a natural SPF is very important. So I advocate a mineral-based SPF. So instead of using a chemical which neutralizes UV rays, you want to use a mineral base that blocks UV rays. This will be our last question. And that way you're deflecting instead of absorbing, because for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, some chemical sunscreen agents are endocrine disruptors. So they mimic estrogen, and so we absorb everything into our body, into our bloodstream. So I would rather not be putting or applying something that is a hormone disruptor on my body, into my bloodstream.